Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Welcome. This is our Circana Smarter Audience Targeting Strategies webinar. We're just getting started. We're just joining. Sorry to be a minute or so late here. We're going to give people 30 more seconds to join. Hopefully the lobby hold music was okay for you all. If not, just give us something in the Q&A. We'll do a better soundtrack next time. Let us know. 15 or 20 more seconds here. We'll get started. Okay, very good. I see a lot of people flooding in, so why don't we get started? All right, hello again, everyone. Welcome. This is being recorded, so for those of you that are watching this later on YouTube or somewhere else, hello to you as well. Very excited to be with you all today for our Smarter Audience Targeting Strategies webinar. I'll jump right into it. If you can't see the slides or if you can't hear me, please just give us a ping or a text in your chat box, and we'll make sure to fix it. But hopefully, so far, so good. So hi, everyone. My name is Dave Slowick. I am part of the leadership team for media here at Circana. Been at Circana for a little over a year. Been a great year. Before that, I spent 12 years at Google, managing some of our global sales teams in automotive and education. Prior to that, I was at Panasonic and a few startups. So I've been in digital media and ad tech for basically my entire career. I've seen a lot of the issues that we're about to talk about today in terms of audience strategies. I know some of the pain points. We've implemented these campaigns. We've measured these campaigns. So I've got a good understanding of this space, and we'll talk a lot more about it today. But nice to meet you all. On the agenda, we'll discuss a couple of things. So we'll talk about some of the challenges that we often hear from our partners. Biggest partners, marketers in general. We'll talk through some of the industry challenges and how we can start to tackle those through diversified audience targeting strategies. Then we'll talk about how we measure it or how we think about the performance of it. And we'll have a few ideas to get started. So again, looking forward to it. I'll jump to the next slide. Sorry, getting used to the system. This is the challenges section. So again, these are things that we hear from some of our biggest partners and from marketers in general. There's lots of hurdles out there, right? It's as hard as ever to be an effective and efficient marketer, but we chose a few to highlight here today to guide our conversation. So thinking of engagement first, this is how do we stay in front of our most valuable consumers in a consistent way, in a way that does not drive creative or ad fatigue, that gets at the right people who could be looking for our products or could be in the market for something that we're looking to sell, and staying with them throughout the process. How do we do that engagement and do it in a, again, efficient and effective way? Part of that is personalization. Again, understanding who it is that we want to target, having an idea of how we get to them the most effectively while respecting the privacy laws and regulations and the things that we all deal with. How do we have an understanding of who we want to target and why? Critical part of keeping them engaged. Another thing that we hear a lot from our partners is how do we find people that are in market, people that are currently in the market for something that we are trying to sell or something that we are trying to get in front of more folks. This has historically been a tough place for people to get good data and for people to really tackle. We've had a lot of innovation in this space at Circana, and it's something that we're really, really bullish on. So when you take all of these together, again, it is a more fragmented and diversified media environment than ever. All of us are dealing with the multiple touch points that our clients and consumers have. These are some of the biggest things that we hear in terms of the challenges as they stand today. And there's lots of different approaches of how do we answer for some of this. The first one I want to acknowledge is first-party data. First-party data, where it's available, is incredibly effective. We've measured thousands of campaigns, and we see it really work. It's efficient. It's great in many ways. It does have some difficulties or some issues. So some of those are on the screen here, but scale is one of them. Let's say you've got a first-party data list from your CRM or from wherever else, and it's a certain number of people or users. When you take that to your partners or take that out into the ecosystem, you might find that the match rates are higher or lower than you thought. Sometimes that can knock down the scale. It's not quite as expansive as you thought it was going to be. Scale can sometimes be an issue. We alluded to the regulations on the last slide, but again, GDPR, all of the different state level regulations we're dealing with. It's a thorny environment. It's one that's important to get right. But those regulations can sometimes lead to a smaller list. The other piece about first party data is it doesn't do as great of a job on competitive acquisition, right? These are your users or your consumers. which is great, but it doesn't allow you to get out into the market and find new users and find new consumers as effectively as you can with some of these other tactics. So a big theme of today is that we want to build our toolkit as marketers and build our toolbox of ways that we can go and tackle some of these problems. First party data is certainly one of them, but there's many others, and that's what we'll discuss today. So jumping to the next slide, we see, again, that diversified targeting strategies are the best performing strategies. Big part of our business, we've measured thousands of ad campaigns, and this comes through over and over and over again, right? People that take these channels differently or take these goals differently, take a different approach, have a diversified strategy, tend to have the best results. You know, that's everything from as basic as you don't measure a CTV campaign in the same way you measure search, right? One, you might measure reach and frequency. The other, you might measure cost per click or cart abandonment or something like that. Having a bespoke audience strategy in each of those areas makes sense and performs better. So again, we'll dive deeply into that now, but setting up that we know that this is a challenging environment to operate in. We know that there's lots of different strategies that we could take and that we are taking. But what we're here to talk about today is what are some of the other things we can do? What additive tools does Circana have that we can add to this toolkit when you think about ways to kind of expand your campaign or expand, sorry, I should have turned off my email alerts, expand your targeting strategies. So let's jump into it. This slide is about our audiences in particular. So we'll use complete audiences as kind of an umbrella term that holds together a lot of the different audiences and products that we have. I mentioned earlier that we've been very innovative in this space, really always, but especially over the past 12 months. We've brought a lot of new ways to target, to market, things like in-market, things like subscription video on demand, SVOD. We'll talk about some of these later. But all of those fit under this complete audiences umbrella. And really, when we say complete, we're talking about the level of our data sets, right? So we've got multiple different data sets that we use to build these audiences with the power of Circana data. This is FSP, so frequent shopper program, loyalty data. We've got receipt and POS data, what was actually sold. We have panel data. And when you bring all these together, you get a really comprehensive and granular data set that is incredibly flexible and scalable and can allow you to really create any kind of strategy you want to satisfy any type of objective, right? So when you think about the scalability of these, that's something we touched on earlier. Our audiences reach up to 96% of US households. And we can help you figure out which ones are most likely to convert using some of these attributes and these data points that we mentioned earlier. Which ones are the highest propensity to convert for you? It's going to be accurate. Again, we've got all these data sets underpinning below to understand what is actually happening, and we see it bear out in the performance data. So we see up to 6x ROI relative to other targeting strategies. So the complete audiences umbrella holds many of our targeting types, which we'll get into. It's based on our data set, which is comprehensive, granular, and accurate due to its breadth and depth. And we have targeting types that can satisfy any objective. Here's one of the other really great parts. We've done a lot of the groundwork, as you can see in the lower right of this slide, to make these available in as many places as possible and make these easy to activate. For everything that you've heard so far and everything that we're about to talk about, you can go into some of these marketplaces and search and look for examples that are relevant to you. Do you want coffee buyers? Do you want somebody that buys regular soda? Do you want laughs? So all of these different things are available, and you can go into these marketplaces and start to understand which one of these are relevant for us. Once you found them, you can push and then activate them in a lot of these places in a very easy way. Again, we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that this is as easy as possible to find, then build, and then activate. For truly custom looks or truly custom data sets that you want to build, it's probably worth it to talk to us. But a lot of this you can accomplish on your own in some of these marketplaces. So let's take a look at what some of those examples are. Before we get into it, we did put out an ebook on this topic. So it's called Target Like a Pro, Elevate Your Campaigns with Precision. And the goal with this ebook was to provide some thought leadership and to provide some proactive thinking on how could you think about taking these data sets and, again, using these audiences to add things to the way you're already measuring, right? You see a lot of KPIs on the screen that many of you probably use or already optimized to. Of course, the gold standard is then bringing in the sales data and understanding what this actually delivered. But these, more shallow metrics or more shallow KPIs are things that we can also use as road signs or as ways for us to understand what's working and what's not. So we'll talk about those now. If we jump to this next slide, we wanted to share a couple of examples. So let's think of top of funnel, and let's think of one of the targeting types I mentioned, or one of the audience types I mentioned, the Circana subscription video on demand. What FD is it is allowing us to get data from a panel of users that have essentially given us logins for things like Netflix and Hulu and others to understand what they're watching and target them appropriately. So let's build out an example. Let's try to bring this to life a little bit. Let's say we're working with a luxury skincare brand. And this luxury skincare brand, through their own internal insights team, has come to understand that the most likely buyers for them tend to watch true crime series. They tend to watch romantic comedies. That's kind of the profile that they fit in or where they sit. Well, using SVOD, you can target those users or those consumers that watch true crime series or romantic comedies, and then come back out and compare it with whatever metric you like best. We used share of voice here, right? Maybe you compare before and after. Running that campaign, did you gain share of voice? Are you seeing more brand searches? Something like that. On the right, we have in-market audiences. So I mentioned this one earlier as well. But we use our data set and we partner with some other players to bring in other data points to help us understand which consumers are displaying behavior that shows they're in market for any given product. So we have a video game console example here. Think of somebody that's out there searching for that repeatedly. Maybe they've added it to their cart a few times and then walked away. We've got the ability to get at some of those consumers and show you where those people are. In market, in my past history at Google and places like it, has always been a critical way to target for people that have longer purchase cycles, right? When we have to follow this user through that complicated funnel that we talked about earlier, we know that they're researching and searching and trying to get their arms around the decision they want to make. That in-market audience type is so valuable. That's one of the places that we spent a lot of time innovating over the past months. So this is now ready and available for you again in all the places that we talked about earlier. Jumping to the next slide with a few more examples. This one is really about creating hyper-personalized ads using SVOD, right? So let's think about using the demographics and interests along with these audience types to create something that's hyper-personalized during something like holiday season or Black Friday or something like that. Think of any of these different seasonal events where you could have, I see some questions flowing in, that's great, where you could have some of these strategies start to really take hold or start to really make more sense. I've mentioned cart abandonment a couple of times during the call today, but again, thinking of these longer purchase cycles, the ability to understand who's in market and repeatedly searching for these really gets you into that zone where you can go find new users, new consumers. You can start to expand, right? You can be more in the middle of the funnel as opposed to reaching. You're really finding somebody that's at that moment, and you're using these other signals to understand, all right, how far down the funnel are they or how close are they? And then you can obviously use your targeting and strategy appropriately to get in front of them. So that's a few ideas. It's easy to get started. We've kind of laid out the steps here, but I want to just double down on some points we made earlier. These are pretty intuitive audiences. Once you get into the marketplaces and start to search for things that make sense to you, you'll probably find that there's things in here that are interesting or fit with your strategy. Again, come to us if they don't. But once you find them, you can then activate them everywhere, right? So just pick a channel and pick a campaign and say, all right, we're going to try this here. We're going to see how it goes and how it compares to our other campaigns. Obviously, the best way to figure out what's going to work for you is to get in there and start playing around with it and testing it. And then there's plenty of ways to measure the performance, right? We have in-flight solutions. We have holistic lift solutions. There's lots of different ways to judge success here. But one of the important things is to just get started and to give it a try. So bringing this all together and thinking about this holistically, obviously audiences and targeting is a place that we've all been focused on in the advertising community. Digital has made it possible for us to do that in a much more comprehensive way. Circana has really innovated in this space based on the comprehensive data set that we have. It makes a lot of these cool examples or different approaches possible. So it's worth it to try. This is kind of the easy way to get started and do that. And it's all on the screen here. We'll share a lot of this stuff afterwards, the ebook and this Transform Your Linear TV Ads book. So slightly early. That's all we have in terms of content. I'll go back to this slide while we jump back to the Q&A. So I'll kind of leave this up while we talk. But I did see a couple of questions come in. So let me jump to those. All right, Teresa, can Circana combine my first party data with your data to create these audiences you've talked about? Is Todd McClymonds on the call?
Hey, yes. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You guys hear me? Okay, sweet. Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. So if you have first party data, there's a couple different ways we can work with it. Whether it's we're doing an append, and sorry, I'm sick today, so my voice sounds terrible. But we can do an append of our audiences to like a first party data file. Once we pass it through some identity resolution, or we can build audiences, or even push transaction data to an environment where you can commingle it with your first party data to build those audiences yourself. So there's a couple of different ways we can do that, but yes, that is a perfect use case for these audiences, and combining them with your first party data is one of the best things you can do with these.
Great, thank you, Ted. Jason, is it possible to blend web user behavior data and or GA4 audiences with Circana audiences? If so, how? So web user behavior data is part of our in-market audiences, for example. There are ways to do that from a partnership perspective. I don't believe we can do it from GA4. I'm checking with the experts here. I don't think so. I don't believe there's a way we can do it GA4, but this is probably one that we could talk about. So reach out to us if you have specific use cases here, something that you're thinking of. We can talk about it, but GA4, I don't believe so. We can provide more data on what web user behavior looks like from our point of view and the ways we partner to get that in there. It's comprehensive. There's millions of signals that go in as part of that. So we can provide more clarity and more data there. But I don't believe you can use the GA4 audiences. All right, Teresa, how are clients using audiences today? Colin says, how do you measure whether the targeted ads translated to purchase behavior? I'll take Teresa's first. So how are clients using audiences today? How much time do we have? We could talk about this for a long, long time. I'm going to give a couple examples. I'll give one example of some of the ways people are using audiences just to kind of bring it to life. But there's really part of the beauty of the data set is that it's very flexible and you can use it in a lot of different ways that make sense for you. But let's take an example. Let's say you've got a competitive scenario. Let's say you're in coffee or beverage, something like that, and you want to understand somebody that's in your category, potentially purchasing your competitor, but not you over the last year. And you want to target those people to try to conquest and get some of that market share. You can do that. Do you want to understand lapsed buyers, either from a category or brand perspective, and target those people differently? You can do that. Do you want to build a data set of people that have purchased recently, and so you want to suppress those audiences, get some efficiency by having negative targeting? You can do that too. That's a couple marketplaces that you can go and find out how they're going to work for you, right? You can see, does that fit with your strategy, your campaigns, whatever. The other way you can think about it is, what are some interesting questions or interesting angles that you've thought of, that you've seen in your own research or your own user behavior or purchase behavior that you want to validate with us and potentially build an audience from? You can do that. It's really, really flexible. So there's tons and tons of different ways. Pending time, I'll come back to this if we want to talk through some more. Any that I missed? Todd, Jen, anybody else that's on? All right, we can leave that one there. All right, Colin, how do you measure whether the targeted ads translated to purchase behavior? So we can use a couple of our other products to get this done. So you see in-flight referenced on this slide. We can understand conversions that are in-flight optimization product, which I won't get into the details of, but the high level of it is you can understand on a weekly basis kind of what's happening, what conversions you're seeing, how this is translating into real life. We also have measurement through our Lift product, so household sales lift, which will do a more holistic campaign look. It'll give you some buyer breaks and other different levels of analysis. But we've got multiple products that can help us understand how this translates to purchased behavior. My agency creates media strategy and does the buy. How do you suggest I go about having the conversations with them? So we deal with obviously the agency, manufacturer, advertiser, Circana dynamic all the time. It's a dynamic that works really well. We invest a lot of time and effort in making sure that our partnerships with agencies are the best they can be, because we know how important they are from a strategic perspective, from an operational perspective, executional perspective, all of those things. So we spend a lot of time here and we see this all the time. There's a lot of different right answers to this question, but one of them is definitely putting it into the creative brief and helping them understand that this is part of what you want to do. Getting that on board early, maybe suggesting an audience deep dive with them, understand where they're placing your campaigns today, suggesting that you want these types of campaigns to be part of the strategy, right? Purchase-based or deterministic or whatever. You can do all of that with your agency. I think the high level of it is have a seat or have a meeting with them, sit down and just talk about what the strategy is and all of the different tools in their toolkit, right? So what audiences are they applying today? How are they thinking about it? How do they think about some of the audiences we've talked about or these data sets? Over the long term, again, it typically makes sense from a performance perspective that ultimately bears it out. I would recommend a test and learn campaign of, again, choosing a couple of these to say, all right, we're going to try these. And based on performance, we can either dial that volume dial up or down based on how it's achieving for us. Another idea that comes along kind of on the backside of that agency question is the idea that you should be looking at your audience strategy kind of holistically relatively often, right? So we host audience workshops with some of our clients where we'll sit down and say, hey, tell us your goal, give us a brief, tell us what you think from your insights and from behavior that you've seen would work for you, and let's build a strategy together. So again, I mentioned that if you're building a bespoke strategy or something more granular, we can actually talk, our teams can get together and talk through this. Audience workshops is one of the ways that we do that. And so at these workshops, we will sit for an hour or 2 hours or however long you like, really, and talk about, again, what's the right strategy? What do we see working? And how could we apply that specifically to your campaigns and your targeting types? Getting another question that just popped through. How do I determine, from an agency perspective, how do I determine which of my clients would benefit the most from this? So we work with all different types of clients across all industries. I think IRI, MPD, Circana, or IRI and Circana, I should say, are kind of known for CPG. Our merger with MPD a few years ago brought Gen Merch to us, so we work in both of those industries. I think speaking at a high level, in generalizations, CPG tends to be a more data poor industry, right? Where they're looking for, those clients are looking for more data, more insights around what's moving and what's moving things now. Gen Merch tends to have a little more data. Sometimes it's more first party, sometimes it's a little broken out a little bit differently, but really this can work for any client. I mean, I was in automotive, like I mentioned, to Google, and this was a huge focus for us. In market, of course, but then as you get down to auto parts and other things, there's different audience strategies that went in there. So it works really across any industry. I would say based on client, it comes down to what are their goals and what are their objectives. And again, thinking through how could we build a creative strategy using this data that speaks to some of those goals. All right, I'm keeping an eye on Q&A. We do have 5 minutes left, so no problem with giving people time back if we're all good, but just making sure I did not miss any. Okay, I don't see any that I missed. Okay, 25 minutes in. A huge thank you to everybody that connected live today. A huge thank you to everybody that's watching this recorded on YouTube or wherever else later. We really appreciate and value your time. We think we've got a really strong set of audiences and audience targeting types that we can bring to market based on our best-in-class data set. Working together, we can figure out what the right approach is for you. Again, it's highly flexible, but also go to marketplaces. Any of the marketplaces, LiveRamp, think of any of these. A lot of these are preloaded. You can start to see what's in there and get at least a high-level idea of how you could use it. We've got one last-minute question from Day. I'll answer it. How can media partners leverage this? I think within the ecosystem, we can push these audiences really anywhere. So however your clients or partners like to use the data or wherever they like to activate it, we're probably good to go. There were some logos on the slide earlier. Reach out to us if you want more or a greater understanding on this question, but you can leverage it anywhere. So that's all for today. Let's connect. Feel free to email me directly. Feel free to reach out to your Circana representative if you have one. Again, if you don't, email me. We'll figure it out. But lots of great work we can do here together. Lots of innovation coming in this space from our side, and really looking forward to figuring out how we can make it work best for you. Thanks, everyone. See you all soon. Thanks.